This is Generation Health. Every week we bring you news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices for living a long, healthy life. With the tools and information available to us today, this generation has the potential to be the healthiest in human history. Following in the footsteps of our founder, Joe DiMatteo, we are the second generation of a family dedicated to helping you live longer and better. Sitting to my right, Mr. Dante DiMatteo, registered pharmacist, certified strength and conditioning specialist. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Tyler. Thank you.
I know it. And across from me is Joey DiMatteo, registered pharmacist and board certified clinical nutritionist. It's your best day ever, isn't it?
It is. Good to see you, Tyler.
We are having a wonderful, wonderful morning here. I am your host, Tyler Andrews, and on today's show, we've got a lot. We've got listener questions. We have the oldest newborn in history, which I think was the coolest story ever, and also are statins keeping you fat? Something a little controversial we're going to get into there. Kind of interesting. But first, the most important part of the entire show, the unrelated question of the day. Who was your nemesis in school?
Wow.
I'm thinking grade school here. I love that I just caught you off guard with that.
The only thing I can think of nemesis-wise is like sports would be Franklin Regional.
Yeah?
Franklin Regional High School.
Oh, okay, so a whole school.
A whole school, yeah.
Right.
In sports, in basketball and football.
Well, we don't need them as customers, so go ahead and let's just...
There's a few Murraysville people there.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
we have a few Murraysville people. But yeah, that's the only thing that comes to mind. I didn't have any personal nemesis, fortunately.
Yeah. That's good.
In school, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go with our sports rival.
Man, the Franklin Regional rivalry trickled down all the way to us, too.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I graduated 11 years after him.
Yeah.
And there was still... There was still bad blood,
It
but
was
now
still
we're
percolating.
we're friends with like most of those guys now.
Yeah.
So, we've since got over our issues.
So they would say the same thing about you guys.
Definitely.
I think
Fair
they
enough.
would.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was much more personal when I thought about this. My nemesis in school was a kid named Jeff. I won't go into details, but I hated Jeff. Jeff,
Well, now you got to tell us.
I forgive you. No, it was elementary school, and he said words that I did not know, and he accused me of things that I wouldn't understand until I was an adult.
Oh.
And now I can look back and go, oh wow, Jeff came from a hard family and like probably had real rough circumstances, and my sweet, gentle self was sheltered, and he did his best to rip that away.
Come on, Jeff.
I know.
We got to get Jeff on the show.
He probably was a fun guy.
Thankfully that was in Maine when I lived in Maine, and so I left there.
trying to
when
find
him. Oh gosh,
Jeff, if you hear this,
Tyler, we've got a surprise for you on today's show.
If you're from Murraysville and you're watching this,
Oh my gosh. Okay, all right. Listener questions. Let's start with one of those. This is an email in from Paula. She emailed us at questions@askjoedimatteo.com, where you can email us too. What vitamins are helpful in recovering from a frozen shoulder brought on by a shot in the arm? How should future shots be administered to avoid this? I'd never even heard of that. Is that a normal thing that a shot could give you a frozen shoulder?
so yeah, frozen shoulder. I guess technically it is possible,
Right.
but you just want to make sure that it's actually frozen shoulder and that you're not just saying, I have frozen shoulder.
Adhesive capulitis.
Yes.
Adhesive capsulitis.
Yes, which is a legitimate diagnosis. And so it would take a thorough workup from your physician or your physical therapist, potentially some imaging, I don't even really know if you can see on imaging if that's exactly what's causing it. But essentially there's something with the tissue musculature that causes almost like contracture or like pulling together of like the shoulder capsule.
Okay.
And so without going crazy in depth into the the anatomy of the shoulder, it obviously just sounds like a pretty nasty thing to have to deal with.
Yeah.
In reference to it specifically, again, being caused by a vaccine, that's tough to say.
You almost would say like nerve damage, or it would hit like a nerve or something, not an entire capsule issue.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
that's interesting. Because I mean, for the most part, anytime I've had an immunization, I've had a stiff shoulder. It's been painful. There's been some muscle pain. You almost feel like your movement's restricted.
Right.
It can extend past a few days, a week,
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah.
And then eventually it kind of goes away. So I guess, again, not to harp on this, but you want to just delineate if this is actually adhesive capsulitis versus just, man, my shoulder's pretty jacked up after the shot.
Exactly.
Yeah. She didn't say it was a vaccination, just as a shot. But I know, I've had, it was a tetanus that always makes your arm feel awful.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's entirely, it seems, it would be surprising if the actual injection is what caused frozen shoulder, because that's typically caused by radically different things.
And usually takes 12 to 18 months to resolve.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just trying to do some supportive things. It actually gets worse.
Yeah.
In the first, period of time for the first few months. So I don't know. There's just a lot of things that aren't adding up.
Yeah,
This sounds very acute, whereas frozen shoulder is not acute in the sense that it happens right away. It kind of gradually gets worse. There's just a few things that don't quite check out if it's shot related.
Right.
Yeah, there's just some interesting things I came across as well, kind of in reference to what Joey's saying. Usually it's somebody maybe who presents with frozen shoulder. They may have had a history of like rotator cuff injury, something maybe that's historically happened to the shoulder, broken arm, something along those lines. Maybe they had a surgery. Stroke is even a potential factor here for some people. And then there's even certain systemic diseases that I guess are associated with this as well. So individuals with diabetes are way more likely to have it. Overactive thyroid, underactive thyroid, cardiovascular disease, Parkinson's disease. There's all kinds of things. And I don't want to get lost in separate from her kind of question, because there very well may be a link between the specific shot that she got and the frozen shoulder if it is in fact an actual, the actual diagnosis.
But she should be seeking further diagnosis, because
I would,
based on what you're hearing, it doesn't make direct sense. This isn't a normal causation.
Yes, does seem odd. And then
so there could be something else going on that she's not aware of.
Sure, exactly. And then even if it is frozen shoulder, let's just say, it's not a helpless sort of situation. A lot of times it does take some time. Like Joey said, it can be self-limiting, take care of itself. Oftentimes individuals, just from doing some basic movement on their own, it can resolve. They can go to physical therapy, and you can actually have somebody begin to, do more manual therapy, which if you have frozen shoulder, I'm sure it doesn't feel very good to have that done. You can go as far as surgical procedures. There's a whole host of things that you can do, kind of medically or even from a physical therapy standpoint as well. And then I don't know if Joey has anything to add.
You can even do like cortisone injections. I mean, if if it's really bothering you, and it's something that, again, we had talked about those in a prior episode, but not something you want to do all the time. But yeah, if it's bothering you that much and you're having trouble with the range of motion, which we would certainly have you do more natural, get this thing moving. Cortisone injections can at least give you some relief.
Okay. So anything that she should do specifically, just dealing with shoulder pain, such as it is, even if we're assuming it's not directly frozen shoulder.
Yeah. I think some things for inflammation, just in case it's not, frozen shoulder and it's just sore shoulder for whatever reason. Maybe it's related to the shot. Maybe it's just not frozen shoulder. We keep going around in that circle. But back to turmeric, anti-inflammatory, and fish oils. Just classic anti-inflammatories, I think, for that is definitely what I would do. And see if any relief is garnered from that. If no relief is gained, then it maybe is more likely to be, kind of the frozen shoulder, versus if it was more just like a typical type of pain or injury.
Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Yeah. And the last thing, this is kind of an aside to this. Just as somebody who gives immunizations, it seems like such a routine thing to do at this point. You see people of all shapes, sizes, genders, and such. And so some people have a little more tissue there. Yep. Some people don't. Some people have just, larger deltoids or an area that you have a more easy place to aim, let's just say.
Right.
So, there's a chance that this has nothing to do with the specific shot that she got. Maybe they administered it a little high. Maybe it was a little low. Maybe they grabbed a 1.5-inch needle instead of a 1-inch needle, and they have limited tissue. That's seemingly like worst case. Because there's the potential. Like, think about getting a cortisone injection. Like goes directly into the capsule of your shoulder. Now that takes some skill to do that. Yeah. So I doubt that your pharmacist like accidentally gave you an intra-articular injection.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just hitting the wrong spot, a nerve too short of a needle, too long of a needle, those things matter, and that can contribute to maybe the duration of the symptoms that she's having.
Yeah.
So is there any, I mean, like she said, is it where should shots go in the future to avoid that? Is there somewhere in particular?
Yeah. I mean, there's as far as like specifically on the arm, I
guess, yeah, or posterior, or, are there other areas that injections can go?
I think, with kind of your run of the mill shots, immunizations, your deltoid is probably the only place they're going to.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to believe that there's like long-term issues with her getting shots.
Yeah, switch arms.
Yeah,
maybe next time do your dominant arm if she didn't, like little things like that, or just come to the medicine shop instead.
There it is.
We had to aim for the.
I think Dante was saying that there's maybe more like of a mistake that happened, one time versus like that she's got a problem, that's going to recur.
Mm-hmm. Well, and probably evidence of that is the fact that this is probably not the first injection she's ever gotten.
Yeah.
But this sounds like this is the first time this has ever happened.
Yeah, and you don't want to discount it. I mean, there's easily a nerve could have been hit. I mean, it's who knows?
Yeah.
But try to keep it moving and just do sorts of movements, again, just with the classic exercise spiel. Just find the entry point of things that aren't overly painful.
Yeah.
So if that's just literally like trying to get your arm up over your head as high as you can and stopping it and holding it there, and then over the next 2 days trying to find something that's pushes it a little more. I mean, and then at that point, if you notice that nothing is helping, that goes back to just trying to seek some more professional help.
Love it. Well, the next thing we got on here is a bit of a philosophical debate, less of a hard science thing. The notion that are statins keeping us fat? This came from an opinion piece published in The Lancet, which I didn't realize they had opinion pieces in Lancet, but apparently they do.
Yeah.
It's in the diabetes and endocrinology portion of Lancet. And the lead author was Naveed Sattar, professor of metabolic medicine at the University of Glasgow. And he said, quote, better treatments like statins and blood pressure tablets are indirectly helping to fuel the obesity crisis. It is a brilliant success that people are being kept alive for longer so that someone who might have died at 60 from a stroke or heart attack is living until the age of 75. But if weight is not discussed, that person could end up with multiple health problems linked partly to being overweight and on dozens of different drugs. Okay, so what is the argument here? What is it that he's suggesting?
I believe he's just suggesting essentially that people feel like taking a statin is basically liberty to be unhealthy. That they feel like if they can just take this pill, that their cholesterol will come down, that there's supposed to be all these other benefits that their doctor talked to them about, and that as long as they're taking this, eating a little bit extra, exercising a little less, all those things are going to be okay because they're taking a statin, and there's probably an 80 or 90% chance that they're also taking a blood pressure pill. You know what I mean? That they feel like they're being fixed by some of these pills. That's the way I took it.
Yeah. Okay. So if statins or blood pressure pills or what have you weren't in the picture, if that wasn't an option, we're going back 50 years. What would the recommendation be from a doctor should your cholesterol come back high?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you both know, like, these are the kind of things like I semi have a problem with, which is why we're talking about it.
That is why we're talking about it.
But I think generally like the premise is a little bit flawed. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. In theory, if we do go back all those years, I think what you would find is that, less people were alive.
Well, right. Like, but I mean, what would the doctor say in that situation?
Yeah. And the other part of the kind of the flawed premise is that doctors, they're ignoring this. There's no guidelines for obesity, for how to lose weight and all those kind of things. Those things are all there. Generally, doctors are recommending that, at least, the ones that we know and see. It's just, the problem is it's just harder to get those things into action. It's harder to find sustainable weight loss. It's hard to, adhere to an exercise plan for a multitude of reasons. This is like this is the prime example of a can of worms.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I think it's just still could be a possible reason why then people just feel like, well, I'm doing the pill, so I'm okay. Do you know what I mean? I guess that's all. That's all. And then to link it to something possibly scientific, I did find this actually came out of the Mayo Clinic. They say here that statins decrease leptin expression in human white adipocytes. So if leptin is responsible for inhibiting hunger, and you're decreasing what inhibits hunger, there could actually be a mechanism.
Okay, so you're talking about a direct link.
Yes.
I don't think that was the point of the article. No. I think the idea was that he was just saying people feel like they're getting off the hook.
I agree. Yeah, so I just started, basically just Googling that statement.
Wow.
And came and found that. So
interesting.
Yeah, and then just to continue to go down the track that I was going.
Please.
It's just this kind of stuff again just goes with the the obesity epidemic and all of that sort of thing is basically like a call to like a failure in willpower, which doesn't really do any good, the food environment is drastically different. There's way more in the food environment as far as like hyper palatable stuff, easily accessible food deliveries, just everything. It's way different than it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Things that we're now all up against that, if we were to continue to sit here and say, people just need to basically try harder and you'll kind of figure it out. That just does everybody a disservice,
Sure.
So I know I probably could have phrased that a little differently, but
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, but that isn't to discount the reality that Harvard 2017,
mm-hmm.
Harvard put out a study that said that 71.6% of all Americans are overweight and 42% are obese in the U.S. Those are huge numbers
mm-hmm.
of Americans. It is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying it's not just a matter of willpower. There's a lot more going on in our modern day world that is different from, say, 50 years ago.
That makes it harder for sure.
Yeah. So what do we do? Then we know that treating it as a failure in willpower, we know that for a fact that doesn't work. It doesn't get anybody to do anything positively. So we have to use a blend of, sort of the behavioral change talking and the motivational interviewing and all those different strategies with people and amongst ourselves, in addition to, making sure things like making sure people are adhering to statins. They are adhering to, their diabetes medication. They are adhering to a new weight loss medication. All of those things, hopefully plays a synergistic role in decreasing that, some of those numbers that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But yeah,
okay.
But philosophically, I mean, it's a great question. It is. It's just hard to wrap my head around, just given everything. But.
Understood. I just thought it was interesting. I hadn't seen anybody phrase it quite that way. So
super interesting.
Brilliant. All right. Email from Donna. I am currently in chemo and have purchased the powdered essential greens, reds, and oranges as part of my chemo diet. Forcing myself to drink all of these dissolved powders can get tough. Do you have any fruit and vegetable capsules that I could take with plain water instead? Also, what are the most nutrient-rich foods that a patient should try to eat if they can? Okay, this is a layered question here. Chemo is a serious situation. What is different about a chemo diet from a normal diet?
Quick and dirty. I mean, there's not a ton that's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
I just think maybe you're just going to employ slightly different strategies for this person, as far as how they approach maybe an upcoming chemo infusion. But it's not like you're going to be recommending 3 times the amount of protein, 6 times the amount of vegetables, three times less of this nutrient for somebody who's on chemotherapy versus who isn't. It's just there's going to be some nuance maybe with timing, tolerance, and so
what's
the
problem? What's the roadblock?
Yeah,
so I think tolerance.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is if we just kind of start at the top, like what is chemotherapy? What happens with chemotherapy?
Yeah.
So if in the quickest way possible, chemotherapy, typically somebody has to go inpatient for a day or two for a few hours to have chemo, or whatever's treating their cancer infused. And so we know with chemo, these medications aren't generally well tolerated. So you have people coming home with fatigue, hair loss, pain, poor appetite, throat sores, mouth sores, nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, central nervous system effects like tingling, peripheral neuropathy, burning, all those kind of things. So the way at least that I interpreted this, or the way I would approach it, is you look at all those things and you just say, from a dietary perspective, what can we do and what can we hone in on to maybe mitigate some of those as best we can? Now, we know for sure you're not going to be able to mitigate them all from a dietary perspective.
Right.
So again, it's just most important to say, like, what the heck's happening here with chemo? And so that's, in a quick and dirty, what's happening. So what do we do? I think if we look at it maybe in three ways, you say, what do we do pre-treatment? What do we do shortly post-treatment? So like in maybe the hours to, day or two after infusion, and then looking at general habits.
Okay.
So pre-treatment, we want to, and to go back to your point, we want to stick with things that are tolerable. So foods that don't upset your stomach, things that you can eat and keep down, especially if your therapy has the tendency to make you feel queasy. So choosing foods that you like that aren't going to irritate you. Preferably bland foods, I guess, almost the same way. Same things you'd give your child if they had had a stomach bug and they're starting to eat again.
Okay.
All of those kind of principles.
Right.
Because eating something, even if it's not the most nutrient dense at first, still beats not eating at all.
Yeah.
So I'd be remiss to say, like, no days off. As soon as you come home, I want you to go back to the leafy greens and the protein shakes and the 8-ounce steak. It's just, I just think that's too difficult.
Yeah.
It's just, you come home and you're basically have an acute kind of illness on top of what you're already dealing with. So in that initial phase, you're going to be doing a lot of those things. You're going to try to ensure that you're hydrated. So keeping down as much fluids as you can. And then again, you're just individualizing this to yourself, finding things that you like, finding and taking note of the things that maybe you didn't tolerate real well the first time around. Maybe it was the spicy stuff or the burger that you ate, or maybe it was something that you thought was a great idea that just wasn't. So you got to try to take note of those things.
Okay.
And then shortly post-treatment, not a whole lot changes because you're still going to kind of feel a little rough for those couple days. So take the same approach, and then from there start to build back in some of the food volume if you can. And as far as specifics go, this is where maybe you want to consider doing shakes, making shakes ahead of time with whey protein powder or plant-based protein powder, the fruits and vegetables mixed in, or something like the greens, the reds, the oranges mixed in there, especially since you're not eating as much of the actual greens, reds, and oranges.
Okay. So, Joey, what are the essential greens, reds, and oranges? I've never messed around with those.
So I think, and I think she means purples, but either way, greens are basically going to have a good bit of nutrients in them. They're going to attempt to replace eating some greens. There's some fiber in there. There's, a lot of those blends. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing these things. But, and obviously you'd want to get them from real food, but she's obviously, like Dante was saying, she's going to have some issues doing that at times, especially depending on what type of chemo she's on. Certain chemos are going to make food taste metallic. Certain chemos are going to give you the mouth sores. You're just not going to be able to eat. You're going to want to eat popsicles and Jello. So there's going to be a wide range of things. But what they are, again, that's the greens, the oranges. They'll get a little more into energy, detox, and then the purple is a little more of like an anti-aging, like antioxidant one. So there's nothing wrong with doing those. I think, though, first thing that comes to mind for me is there's really no calories in those. So if she's not eating, she's not getting any calories, but she feels like she is because she's getting her greens and things like that. And I think that could be a bit of a problem. So I would go back to what Dante said, like the shakes. So we have an essential meal that's going to encompass a lot of these things. It's going to have maybe not as catchy of a name in some of the blending and stuff like that, and the fruit names and stuff, and so, but it's still going to have macro and micronutrients in there. So, and then I would add in protein, especially glutamine is key to cancer, especially like the lining, especially if you're having the lining issues and those types of things. Glutamine is a key amino acid that's going to be found in the protein. It's easier for me to say than maybe for her to do, but if she could mix in like some protein with the essential meal and prioritize those over some of the greens, she may end up getting, she's going to get the calories, she's going to get the macros, she's going to get some of the micros, and then like a daily essentials to make sure that she's getting all the actual nutrients. So she's not missing trace minerals and things like that. And then where she can eat the actual greens and stuff where you can. But again, mixing a scoop of that in is not a problem. Yeah. I'm just, again, it feels like that she's going to be missing calories.
Calories are key.
She's missing calories, she's missing protein, she's still going to be missing some trace nutrients.
Okay, so even if we don't have the what did she ask about, pills of fruit and vegetable capsules,
right?
We don't have any of those. What we've got are the essentials.
Right, honestly, you'd have to start taking 6-8 of those, not to cut you off, but that's why.
Yeah. So we don't have those, but even if we did, that wouldn't solve the problem, because the issue isn't so much purely a nutrient one, it's a straight up calorie one. You're not getting enough calories to keep running.
Get the right calories.
Yeah, you just know around your infusions that the day leading into it, you're probably eating less. The day and 2, 3, 4 after, you're going to be eating less. That begins to add up over the course of a treatment, and plus you're going to be, fatigue is high.
Yep.
Appetite's down as it is. And so you're just, ultimately you're kind of up against a lot, in that respect.
Got to get those calories to keep that fatigue at bay and try and keep that appetite up as well.
Yeah. And the other thing too, for the average person, I'm not typically recommending a meal replacement shake at this point, because we know for sure, we don't know anything for sure, but we know that liquid calories just aren't as satiating. They're not as filling.
Sure.
So if you're somebody on a diet,
right,
it's probably not the most filling option, but for this person, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Because you almost want to start doing these shakes potentially in addition to meals if you can, just because any way to bolster, trying to maintain muscle mass just through calories and through protein intake, any way you can begin to do that.
Her meals may be so small.
The meals, exactly. Especially for recommending small meals leading in and small meals after.
Yeah.
If you have 150, 200, 300 extra calories in a shake, that's all kind of good stuff, then we want that in this case. Even
absolutely.
This is even the time for sports drinks, which we're not recommending
normally
sugar-sweetened beverages typically to people, but I think that we go off script here a little bit.
You can go find some good ones too. You can get like the vitamin water zeros and the Gatorade zeros and stuff like that. You can at least nowadays you have some options on the sports drink world at least. But
But this is a very hyper specialized situation. This is not general advice for everybody. This is somebody dealing with cancer, life-threatening issue.
And then of course we got to pull the pharmacy perspective into this too, and to ensure that you go into your infusions, into your treatments on your best leg, on your best foot forward. Try to be adherent to your prophylactic medications that they often prescribe. So they might put you on a steroid. They might put you on Dancitron or Zofran, something like that beforehand. They might give you something like that for afterwards.
Those are nausea medications?
They are.
Yeah.
And the steroids it's a little complicated, but sort of that cocktail of medications just helps individuals tolerate those treatments a little better. And even if it's a small percentage of tolerating it better, that might mean that you can eat 300-400 more calories in a day.
Yeah.
Just because you're able to keep the stuff down.
And so you got to keep that going, because Donna, you're going to beat this. And
that's right.
We want you to be healthy. Very, very cool. Well, in the interest of ending on a higher note, you don't remember 1992, do you?
I was born in 93.
That's what I thought.
So
young buck. All right, Joey, what do you remember about 1992? Specifically April of 1992.
April of 1992.
I've got some notes here.
I cannot remember anything of April 1992.
John Gotti was found guilty of 5 murders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. George Harrison performed his final full concert at Royal Albert Hall.
LA riots.
Yeah.
Wow.
Microsoft announced Windows 3.1.
3.1.
That was a big one in my life. I spent a lot of time on Windows 3.1. And the All-Star benefit concert in memory of Freddie Mercury was held at Wembley Stadium. It featured Queen, Roger Daltrey, Robert Plant, David Bowie, George Michael, Elton John, Axl Rose. It was a big concert.
Wow.
But that's not the only thing that happened. There were also a couple of embryos frozen from somebody's IVF treatment, and they stayed frozen for 30 years until this past October. Born on October 31st, that being Halloween, Lydia and Timothy Ridgway were born from what may be the longest frozen embryos to ever result in a live birth, according to the National Embryo Donation Center. The embryos were created from an anonymous married couple, using in vitro fertilization. The husband was in his early 50s at the time, and they used a 34-year-old egg donor. The embryos were frozen on April 22nd, 1992, and the babies finally were given birth this year. The couple that had them said they just wanted whichever ones had been waiting the longest, and they managed to have 2 very healthy, happy babies. That's just cool. For those that don't know, how does IVF work? Why were their babies frozen for 30 years?
Frozen babies.
Okay. All right. Frozen embryos, if we're going to be specific. But yes.
Because usually, I believe that the answer would be is because they were extras whenever the IVF process was being done. So basically, a woman takes fertilization drugs. You withdraw an egg or multiple eggs from the woman, and then from the sperm donor, you withdraw, and essentially in a petri dish, you put them together.
Sure.
So there can be extra embryos. So there can be insemination, but there can be extra that you don't want to implant, 3, 4, mom, not an expert on it, but you want to implant too many potentially, of course. So there are extra ones because if it doesn't take, you don't want to just kind of have discarded these either.
Right.
So that's, in a gist why there would be some of those saved like that. It could also be, somebody was paying to do that, for whatever reason.
Yep.
But yeah, if it said directly from IVF, that would be why.
That's super cool. So that means that these, they're just a couple months old at this point, but they're older than you. Isn't that weird?
It is crazy.
It is crazy that they chose the oldest. They wanted the oldest ones,
And
I would have never. Yeah, it's funny that's kind of what they were thinking going into that process.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Very cool. Fun story. Well, any products that we mentioned will be available on our website, askjoedimatteo.com, askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our mailing list, which is a great way to keep up to date on what we're doing here. You can find past episodes of the show. You can find classic episodes of the radio show that started it all, Ask Joe DiMatteo. And if you have any questions, we want to hear about them, email us, questions@askjoedimatteo.com. Show notes will be available on the site. And if you're only listening, you are missing half the fun. Every episode is available as video as well. Just go onto YouTube or Rumble and look for Generation Health. Big thanks to Josiah Schweinberg, who handles the cameras, Michael Deppish, who does our editing, Joyce Gibb, our nurse practitioner, who handles private consultations, Diane Silverman manages our products, Terry does scheduling, Cecilia does distribution. That one's Joey DiMatteo. That one's Dante DiMatteo. I'm Tyler Andrews. And now the question is, what are you going to do with what you have heard this week? Are you just going to listen, or are you going to take action and become part of this Generation Health?